the Jewish brethren in Jerusalem, and those in the land of Judea. To their Jewish brethren in Egypt, greeting and good peace. May God do good to you, and may he remember his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, his faithful servants. May he give you all a heart to worship him and to do his will with a strong heart and a willing spirit. May he open your heart to do his law and his commandments, and may he bring peace. May he hear your prayers and be reconciled to you, and may he not forsake you in time of evil. We are now praying for you here. In the reign of Demetrius, in the 169th year, we Jews wrote to you, in the critical distress which came upon us in those years after Jason and his company revolted from the Holy Land and the kingdom and burned the gate, and shed innocent blood. We begged the Lord, and we were heard, and we offered sacrifice and cereal offering. And we lighted the lamps, and we set out the loaves. And now see that you keep the Feast of Booths in the month of Chislev, in the 188th year. Those in Jerusalem, and those in Judea, and the Senate and Judas. To Aristobulus, who is of the family of the anointed priests, teacher of Ptolemy, the king, and to the Jews in Egypt, greeting and good health. Having been saved by God out of the grave dangers, we thank him greatly for taking our side against the king. For he drove out those who fought against the holy city. For when the leader reached Persia with a force that seemed irresistible, they were cut to pieces in the temple of Nenea by a deception employed by the priests of Nenea. For under pretext of intending to marry her, Antiochus came to the place together with his friends to secure most of its treasures as a dowry. When the priests of the temple of Nenea had set out the treasures, and Antiochus had come with a few men inside the wall of the sacred precinct, they closed the temple as soon as he entered it. Opening the secret door in the ceiling, they threw stones and struck down the leader and his men, and dismembered them, and cut off their heads, and threw them to the people outside. Blessed in every way be our God, who has brought judgment upon those who have behaved impiously. Since on the 25th day of Chislev we shall celebrate the purification of the temple, we thought it necessary to notify you, in order that you may celebrate the Feast of Booths and the Feast of the Fire given when Nehemiah, who built the temple and the altar, offered sacrifices. For when our fathers were being led captive to Persia, the pious priests of that time took some of the fire of the altar and secretly hid it in the hollow of a dry cistern, where they took such precautions that the place was unknown to anyone. But after many years had passed, when it pleased God, Nehemiah, having been commissioned by the king of Persia, sent the descendants of the priests who had hidden the fire to get it. And when they reported to us that they had not found fire but thick liquid, he ordered them to dip it out and bring it. And when the materials for the sacrifices were presented, Nehemiah ordered the priests to sprinkle the liquid on the wood and what was laid upon it. When this was done, and some time had passed, and the sun, which had been clouded over, shone out, a great fire blazed up, so that all marveled. And while the sacrifice was being consumed, the priests offered prayer, the priests and everyone. Jonathan led, and the rest responded, as did Nehemiah. The prayer was to this effect: O Lord, Lord God, creator of all things, who are awe-inspiring and strong and just and merciful, who alone are king and are kind, who alone are bountiful, who alone are just and almighty and eternal, who rescue Israel from every evil, who chose the fathers and consecrated them, accept this sacrifice on behalf of all your people Israel, and preserve your portion and make it holy. Gather together our scattered people, set free those who are slaves among the Gentiles, look upon those who are rejected and despised, and let the Gentiles know that you are our God. Afflict those who oppress and are insolent with pride. Plant your people in your holy places, as Moses said. Then the priests sang the hymns, and when the materials of the sacrifice were consumed, Nehemiah ordered that the liquid that was left should be poured upon large stones. When this was done, a flame blazed up, but when the light from the altar shone back, it went out. When this matter became known, it was reported to the king of the Persians that, in the place where the exiled priests had hidden the fire, the liquid had appeared, with which Nehemiah and his associates had burned the materials of the sacrifice. The king investigated the matter, and enclosed the place and made it sacred. And with those persons whom the king favored, he exchanged many excellent gifts. Nehemiah and his associates called this Nephthar, which means purification, but by most people it is called Naphtha. One finds in the records that Jeremiah the prophet ordered those who were being deported to take some of the fire, as has been told, and that the prophet, after giving them the law, instructed those who were being deported not to forget the commandments of the Lord, nor to be led astray in their thoughts upon seeing the gold and silver statues and their adornment. And with other similar words he exhorted them that the law should not depart from their hearts. It was also in the writing that the prophet, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark should follow with him, and that he went out to the mountain where Moses had gone up, and had seen the inheritance of God. And Jeremiah came and found a cave, and he brought there the tent and the ark and the altar of incense, and he sealed up the entrance. Some of those who followed him came up to mark the way, but could not find it. When Jeremiah learned of it, he rebuked them and declared, "The place shall be unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. And then the Lord will disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord and the cloud will appear. And as they were shown in the case of Moses, and as Solomon asked that the place should be specially consecrated. It was also made clear that being possessed of wisdom, Solomon offered sacrifice for the dedication and completion of the temple. Just as Moses prayed to the Lord, and fire came down from heaven and devoured the sacrifices, so also Solomon prayed. And the fire came down and consumed the whole burnt offerings. And Moses said, "They were consumed because the sin offering had not been eaten." Likewise, Solomon also kept the 8 days. The same things are reported in the records and in the memoirs of Nehemiah, and also that he founded a library and collected the books about the kings and prophets, and the writings of David, and letters of kings about votive offerings. In the same way, Judas also collected all the books that had been lost on account of the war which had come upon us, and they are in our possession. So if you had need of them, send people to get them for you. Since, therefore, we are about to celebrate the purification, we write to you. Will you therefore please keep the days? It is God who has saved all his people, and has returned the inheritance to all, and the kingship and priesthood and consecration, as he promised through the law. For we have hope in God that he will soon have mercy upon us, and will gather us from everywhere under heaven into his holy place, for he has rescued us from great evils and has purified the place. The memory of Josiah is like a blending of incense, prepared by the art of the perfumer. It is sweet as honey to every mouth, and like music at a banquet of wine. He was led aright in converting the people, and took away the abominations of iniquity. He set his heart upon the Lord. In the days of wicked men he strengthened godliness. Except David and Hezekiah and Josiah, they all sinned greatly, for they forsook the law of the Most High. The kings of Judah came to an end, for they gave their power to others, and their glory to a foreign nation, who set fire to the chosen city of the sanctuary, and made her streets desolate, according to the word of Jeremiah. For they had afflicted him, yet he had been consecrated in the womb as prophet, to pluck up and afflict and destroy, and likewise to build and to plant. It was Ezekiel who saw the vision of glory, which God showed him above the chariot of the cherubim. For God remembered his enemies with storm, and did good to those who directed their ways rightly. May the bones of the 12 prophets revive from where they lie, for they comforted the people of Jacob and delivered them with confident hope. How shall we magnify Zerubbabel? He was like a signet on the right hand, and so was Jeshua the son of Jozadak. In their days they built the house and raised a temple holy to the Lord, prepared for everlasting glory. The memory of Nehemiah also is lasting. He raised for us the walls that had fallen, and set up the gates and bars, and rebuilt our ruined houses. No one like Enoch has been created on earth, for he was taken up from the earth, and no man like Joseph has been born, and his bones are cared for. Shem and Seth were honored among men, and Adam above every living being in the creation. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth, in anguish for delivery. And another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems upon his head. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, and cast them down to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who was about to bear a child, that he might devour her child, when she brought it forth. She brought forth a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels, fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Rejoice then, O heaven, and you that dwell therein. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had borne the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river, which the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman, and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God, and bear testimony to Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. 2 Maccabees recounts that the Jews observed Hanukkah, the new festival celebrating the purification of the temple. When Judas Maccabeus purified the temple in the month of Chislev, in the manner of the Feast of Booths, following the temple's desecration by the Greeks, it became a new Jewish feast day. God's temple was the place of encounter between Israel and the Lord, and its purification was necessary for God to be present. At the end of Revelation 11, St. John sees the inner sanctuary of the heavenly temple and the Ark of the Covenant. Then lightning, hail, and thunder obscure his vision. As they clear, he sees, starting in chapter 12, a great sign in the heavens. Where the ark and temple had stood now stands a woman clothed in glory and with a crown of 12 stars. Who is the woman? She gives birth to the Messiah. Since the Messiah is Jesus, the woman must be Mary. In her extraordinary purity, the Virgin Mother is the new purified temple in which God dwells. The dragon cannot conquer the woman, and so enraged he goes off to make war on the rest of her offspring. These are not her biological children as with Jesus, but rather her spiritual children who keep the commandments of God and bear testimony to Jesus. Do you follow the passage and relate to Mary as your spiritual mother?